Hey guys, Pedro here to tell you about the latest from Korpiklani, Ranka Rumpa, out April 5th on Nuclear Blast. The album has 12 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's 12th full-length studio album. They are a Finnish folk metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, I think you're going to find a structure that it's very simple. It didn't need it to be complicated. This is not a concept album, so you have a lot more freedom in terms of how you design the album. You don't have to have this rigid overall structure that forces certain songs into certain places in order for everything else to make sense. This is an album where you could move songs around and the dynamics of the record would stay the same. The key goal with this design is just to put the right songs next to one another so that you create a lot of ebbs and flows, so that you don't find repetition within the experience of the album, because this will make the record more fluid, it will make the record more dynamic, and will also offer the record a lot more playability. So keeping it simple, not overcomplicating, just letting really the songs do the work is the best approach for a record like this, and that's the approach that they took. As far as the sound is concerned, I honestly listened to the album extensively, because in my mind I was afraid that I was listening to this record from the perspective of knowing that they have a new violin player and what kind of impact would he have on the overall experience. But the more I listen to the album, the more I'm willing to say that this album really pushes the folk elements, the violin and the accordion to the forefront in order for them to be the main driving force of the sound, of the experience, of the overall brightness that this record has. And if you think about those two instruments, if you think about their sound, what they offer, outside of the folkiness of them, they're really instruments that bring brightness, that make the sound lighter, and allows the songs to have upper tempos. It allows the songs to be faster, to have more movement, to still have melancholic elements within them, but that melancholy almost at times disappears or just vanishes away, and it gets replaced with this more upbeat and jovial atmosphere that this record has a ton of. So it's an album that brings some of the melancholic elements that we saw specifically in the last two records, but also brings more of that party vibe that's an old school Korpiklani DNA element. The song structures are simpler, the designs of the songs, the length of the songs are a little bit shorter and also simpler, and having that jovial nature of those folk elements being the main conductors of the experience definitely brights up the mood of this entire album, of every single song, regardless of the pockets of melancholy that you're going to find. It's impossible not to have those. They're a Finnish band and they're always going to bring that part of their DNA into a record. But this album definitely has the folk side of the record, and specifically coming out of those two instruments, as the main ingredients. They're really high up in the mix. They come well, they come across a little bit sometimes separated from everything else, and that's what gives them that more emphasis in terms of how they impact the sound and how they impact the atmosphere. But I don't think you can make an album that brings in that melancholy and still feels like a party record without those elements being as predominant as they are. That doesn't mean everything else doesn't have a role. And if you look, for example, at the drums and bass, starting off with the drums, great drum sound on this record. This album has movement as far as the drum sound is concerned. It's not static. And what I mean by that is that so many records you listen to, the drums in the mix are always in the same place, with the same sound, sometimes a little bit more heavy, sometimes a little bit less heavy, but they're always in the same spot. You always know from track to track where the drum sound is going to come from, where it's situated, because it doesn't move from there. And on this record, it doesn't matter if you're listening to it in your car or with great headphones, the movement of the drum sound from left to right and right to left is magnificent, because you have up front that accordion and that violin that are already creating great movement sound-wise. They're injecting a lot of energy into these tracks. So having the drums fill in two roles: one, creating the foundation of the track, filling in the space of the track, but two, also moving along with that violin and accordion sound that's up front, makes the overall songs and makes the overall record move very well, makes it more fluid all around, internally within the tracks and from song to song. And the bass is not that far off. You look at the bass sound on this record, the bass sound also has movement, but the movement is more in terms of how much it comes into the forefront within the mix, and then how much it moves into the background in order to help sustain the more downside of the drum sound. But I also don't think you can have the bass pop as much as it does without jolting the tracks, without those accordions and that violin in the forefront. Sometimes when you have that much brightness, that much light, that much freedom leading the charges, you're able to squeeze in some more heaviness coming from the back, and that heaviness does not destroy what it's been constructed, it rather enhances. And that's exactly what's happening with the drums and bass in terms of how they impact the accordions and the violins in the overall sound design of this record. But the guitars follow suit. Now the guitars are more dynamic in terms of having more ways of impacting these songs. I felt like the guitars really had three roles on this album. One of the roles was with a heavier side of the album. You definitely hear the heavier guitars on this record, and they're, I wouldn't say very consistent, but they are consistent throughout the album. And when they get a little bit heavier, sometimes they also move into the forefront, similar to the way the bass pops. And sometimes they move a little bit back in order to match better the sound that the drums are creating, in order for you to feel that more robust nature, that more robust, thick heaviness of sound in the background, pushing everything else forward. But that's not the only impact that they have. They also bring in a lot of melody, and when they bring in a lot of melody, instead of feeling a little bit more further back where they are when they are slightly heavier, they move a little bit more into the front to match the more melodic elements that are driving the experience. So it's interesting to see these dynamics, because it allows the guitars to also not be static and have a little bit more room to wiggle and allow the tracks to breathe a little bit better. Last but not least, as far as the three key elements of the guitar sound, is that this album has a lot of rock riffs. And I mean like pure like arena rock riffs that would make you put the horns up and jump up. It has that natural arena rock sound coming in, and that more natural sound, not necessarily coming in with heavy metal riffs all the time, but really bringing a rock experience into some of these songs, which when you think about the simplicity of the record, when you think about songs that are jovial, that have great tempo, that make you want to party, even though they might have still some melancholy in them, the rock bass riffs work a lot better in songs like that. It adds a lot more joviality to the track than a more traditional, a little bit more cumbersome heavy metal style riff. So having those works well in the overall concept of the album and the overall idea that they had for the sound of this album. The production behind it allows all of these moving pieces that I just explained to really work well individually, but also work well in terms of how they merge with one another. Now, outside of the guitars, outside of the sound, we obviously have Yone's vocals, and he's really good in this record. He's free, he sounds loose, he sounds very dynamic, but the songs also allow him to be a little bit more free, a little bit more loose, a little bit happier. There's a lot more happier moments within this album, and I feel like you get that happiness out of his voice when he's singing. Some of the backing vocals on this album, specifically in terms of how they approach the chorus constructions, are really good, because they're live. These songs almost built to be performed live. This whole record is really built to be a live album, because the way his voice conducts itself in the verses, moving into the chorus, becoming more explosive, bringing the backing vocals in order to make more volume. All of these elements are extremely well placed, not just in a record, but in a record that's going to be played live, because it's going to ask for the audience to come in and join in on this overall singing experience. This is a sing-along record, and Yone does them better than anybody else as far as what he adds, what he brings, and his own delivery. Consistent as always, this man is getting better with age and better with every single record. And this album from Korpiklani, I think it's a record that a lot of people were waiting for. We've had two great records by Korpiklani if we look back at the past two albums, but they've been a little bit more serious. They've been a little bit more melancholic, if you will. And this album, while still having a lot of that present in, it also brings the brighter side of the band into the fold without necessarily bringing in the cliche, repetitive drinking songs. It's a fun album. It's one that you can definitely drink while you're listening to it, but it doesn't fall flat and it doesn't fall hostage to that idea that every single song has to be a drinking song in order for the album to be a fun, loving record. This album merges two different worlds of Korpiklani together, and it does it extremely well. As far as favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Kalmisto. Talking about rock riffs, I mean, this song starts off with a rock riff, and it's one of those rock riffs that would get a stadium vibrating. It just has all of that live energy in it, and then the violin comes in, then the accordion comes in, and then you get this infusion of folkiness and heavy rock riffs working together to make a really interesting song. It's a little bit more methodic, heavy, and folky in the verses. You feel a little bit more of that, a dark twang, if you will, in those verses. Then the pre-chorus is really somber because there's a little bit of a gap between the verses and the chorus. I'm going to call it pre-chorus, but it's really a pause, a break that makes you almost think that the song is going to take a very dark turn once it moves into the chorus, but it doesn't. The chorus is very explosive in sound and in vocals. It infuses so much brightness. There's so much energy in the chorus of this song that allows this track to just explode in front of you because it felt so contained. In the verses, it felt so contained, and at times it felt like it was going to go and take a dark turn. So having a chorus that is an earworm, that it's bright, that's light, that is vibrant, really allows this song to be a yin and a yang within a single track, but having a chorus that becomes definitely super hooky and super catchy, and it's going to be what brings the listener back to this track. Next, we have the title track for the album, Hanka Humpa, and a short track, not the shortest track on the album, but it's under 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 45 seconds, I believe. So it's under 3 minutes, but not the shortest track on the album. But I like the shortness of it because it allows the track to be about the chorus. And that's, you know, if you have a good song, you need a good chorus because that's what's going to make the track memorable, that and a good riff. And this track kind of has both. So you have this shortness of length as far as the song is concerned. The chorus has a great guitar sound. It has a lot of folky elements that also add volume to the way the chorus comes about, but the chorus is really what sells you on this track, and the backing vocals adding volume as well. I mean, everything is adding volume as far as the chorus is concerned, so using backing vocals is a nice way to add volume with that element, which allows all the elements within it to be big, to be larger than life, and that's what makes this chorus really jump. So it's one of the tracks that you feel like it's very fun, it's very bright, it's very catchy, and it has still great violin and accordion sound, and it allows that sound to become a little bit more predominant towards the end of the track, but it really comes down to that chorus and how good it is. Last but not least, I had to include this song. I mean, if you're gonna put a track on a record named No Perkele, I have to put that song as one of my favorites because this is your prototypical live sing-along song. I will be shocked if this one doesn't make the set list at some point in time because it is that kind of track. It's a guitar-driven track. One of the few tracks on this album where you feel that perhaps the violins and the accordions are taking a little bit of a back seat and allowing the guitars to move more into the forefront and be more dominant in terms of what they offer and how they move the song along. The folkiness is still there, but it's not necessarily the driving piece, or at least not the one that jumps out at the listener at first glance. It creates a more textured song all around. The chorus is brilliant. The backing vocals once again allow the chorus to stand out, making this a sing-along style chorus, sing-along style song. It has great energy, it has great movement. It still offers some melancholy specifically in the verses, but then that bright energy that pumps you into the chorus and the simplicity of the lyrics and the simplicity of the chorus definitely makes this, or what I think it's going to make this, a crowd favorite. This is it, Korpiklani with Hanka Humpa, out April 5th on Nuclear Blast. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section, and I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.